Can you picture a time that you've been so certain that something happened only to discover that your memory was completely false? Well, today we're driving not only into the strange world of the human mind, but also the Mandela Effect, the version of a mass psychosis that can affect an entire population. We're going to look at the case involving James Earl Jones, one of my favorite actors, and unfortunately, someone who just passed away. And we're also going to look at people's memories of 9/11 and how they don't line up with what we call consensus reality. So let's see how it all connects. Firstly, the Mandela Effect is one of the most puzzling psychological phenomena out there. It happens when large groups of people remember historical events or details differently than how they actually occurred. The effect is named after Nelson Mandela because people mistakenly remember him dying in prison in the 1980s, when in fact he lived until 2013. So what's actually going on here? Is it bad memory? Mass psychosis? Something deeper? Do we live in a simulation and these are evidence of some kind of glitch? Well, the Mandela Effect has sparked debates about parallel realities and the unreliability of human memory. Thanks for joining us again today. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please give it a click. This is just a short episode. I do intend to release a full-length episode on the Roanoke colony tomorrow, so stay tuned. I just wanted to touch on, two things that have affected me over the life because they're very relevant today, and that's 9/11 and the death of James Earl Jones. And it just so happens that these two things align closely to one of my favorite obsessions, being the Mandela Effect. So James Earl Jones is not just some dude. This guy was one of my idols as a kid. This is a guy that was born with a speech impediment. He struggled with a severe stutter that left him mute for several years. James Earl Jones isn't just an American actor. He's a man who overcame a severe disability in a time of crazy racism to become a goddamn legend. Unfortunately, James would die on September 9, 2024, a few days ago. And immediately upon his death, a brand new Mandela Effect starts to take traction. And it's that he's been dead this whole time. I don't know if the simulation overlords are messing with us, but I'm pretty sure he's been alive this whole time. Anyhow, the most famous one associated with James Earl Jones is actually his role as Darth Vader in Star Wars. And some people famously misremember the line from The Empire Strikes Back as Luke, "I am your father," when the actual line is, "No, I am your father." This misquotation has persisted for years and is another instance of a false collective memory tied to James Earl Jones. This is one that makes me definitely lean more towards the fact that we might live in a simulation. The Mandela Effects kind of spill into tons of popular culture. There's ones with Jif peanut butter, a whole collective memory of it existing as Jiffy peanut butter. The Mandela Effect also creeps into major historical events. It's not just pop culture like peanut butter and actors. So we're talking about things related to war, things related to terrorism, particularly 9/11. And there's so many people that report 9/11 occurring completely different than it went down. For instance, a lot of people claim to remember the footage of United Flight 93 crashing, even though no such video exists. False memories of these may arise from intense media coverage or visual depictions of air crashes, leading to vivid but inaccurate recollections. This could be just an effect of trauma on the brain, affecting people's kind of collective memory. But then another thing always pops up is that there's a lot of conspiracies around 9/11, like the government knowing it was going to happen in advance, that maybe it was part of a psyop where the government kind of lets it happen to regain political control over a population. The towers essentially were brought down on purpose in a colluded effort between private interest groups and the government. All these things give, I think, this Mandela Effect a little bit more legs because there's a huge sect of people that are really deep on this 9/11 stuff. And why it gives the Mandela Effect legs is because as things and news articles are different than what people swear it is, like for example, seeing the footage of United Flight 93 crashing, there's people out there that really believe the government's suppressing footage, changing news articles, going back and changing like essentially internet articles from like the early 2000s. Could it be possible? Well, yeah, like it happens every single day. There's literally a website dedicated to archiving internet articles and things like that because they're constantly being changed. However, I'm going to tell you right now, one, I think the Mandela effect for sure is affected by our collective trauma. Two, the conspiracy theories that I've seen on this have zero evidence to support them other than conjecture. One thing that was unbelievable, I remember about 9/11 is I was watching the news on, I think it was Fox or something like that. I can't remember. I was like 19. Watching the news when the second plane hit the tower. So I was getting like this live feed of it. And I remember going to school or the college I was at that morning. And I didn't even mention it to my classmates because like between that whole 20-minute walk to school, like I didn't believe that it actually happened. Like in my head, like I couldn't process what I saw until like I actually got to like the classes that morning and everybody's talking about it. And I was like, oh, this was real. So I definitely think those kind of crazy, traumatic, world-changing events shock the brain enough to say that your memory's not going to be the best or your judgment over the whole thing, at least at the outset. Whether it's crazy conspiracies or pop culture references, one question keeps popping up. Why do we get these Mandela effects? And I'm going to jump into, I'm going to say 3 short theories as to how it could be happening. The scary thing is like all these kind of make sense and they're all kind of equally terrifying. And one of them's probably true. So let's move on. One theory is that the Mandela effect stems from mass psychosis, where collective false memories arise due to societal influences, media repetition, possibly trauma, and the brain's natural tendency to fill in the gaps. This is often triggered by emotional or significant events like 9/11. So studies have shown how false memories can also spread and become entrenched through shared experiences and discussions. What that means is that just having conversations about, say, Jiffy peanut butter, or seeing it maybe in a cartoon as a kid because it was like just made up, and you talking about it with your friends, like slowly those little pieces of information embed themselves in your brain and creates itself as reality, even though it's completely false. Now, what's terrifying about this to me is that it just makes me think like, how many things are we wrong about? And 2, how vulnerable are we? So somebody with a lot of power and a lot of time, knowing all of this stuff, 100% could be taking advantage of mass populations by feeding them little bits of information that are wrong or however they want. And because of our human brains, whether you're the smartest fucking person on the planet, eventually you're probably going to believe stuff that's not true. Sometimes all you can hope for is a benevolent dictator. So this next theory isn't that far removed from the one I just talked about if you look at it in a different light, but that's the simulation theory. And simulation theory is that our existence and our experience is part of a simulated universe, either created by a intelligent civilization somewhere in another dimension that's running either tests or maybe trying to run scenarios with us. It could be that we created ourselves in some kind of artificial intelligence simulation where we uploaded our consciousness into a machine. But somewhere, somebody's pulling the strings, and when they go to update the simulation and put in new snippets of computer code, little fragments of that information are left behind in every iteration of the update, causing the Mandela effects. Another cool thing about the simulation is that it might not even be an invisible overload. We could just be existing in something called a Boltzmann brain, which is just a random arrangement of particles in just the right order to bring us into existence for a random split second. All the memories, everything you knew, and just as quick, we're going to flash out of existence and never knew we were here. Oh, that's depressing. And this one kind of plays off both of them, but we're going to get into the control of information theory. So this comes from governments, secret societies, Black Rocks, you name it, intentionally altering or rewriting parts of history. Now, I mean, that sounds pretty crazy. Like there's some secret group out there that would try and alter history, except for, I don't know, all of human existence. What do you mean, guy? Well, Soviet Union. Stalin frequently had political enemies erased from official photos, historical records, in an effort to rewrite his narrative of leadership. Nazi Germany. Okay. This regime systematically destroyed and altered records, books, and historical documents, particularly those related to Jewish history and culture, to promote their own propaganda. The Catholic Church condemned Galileo. They tried to basically have his theories quashed on physics and things like that. And when he suggested that the Earth revolved around the sun, his findings were basically suppressed by the church, and they only admitted to this in 1992. I guess it was a good way for them to take the heat off of all the kids they were having too much fun with. Anyhow, let's talk about MK Ultra. Dude, check out this episode if you haven't seen it on my channel. It's mind-blowing. The US government was drugging unsuspecting people to see how much they were able to affect the human memory and people's perception of realities. Sounds like I'm smoking crack? Well, no, it would be LSD. This actually happened. This goes from crazy conspiracy to consensus reality when the program caused the death of a CIA scientist, and this is outed during the Rockefeller and Church Commissions in 1975. And shortly after, it's also found out that this program was funding something called Project Montreal, where Dr. Ewan McGregor was carrying out human experiments on psychiatric patients. I used to think it was all BS until I actually listened to what the government was telling us. Hey, we did it. Okay, I'm gonna blow your mind, and I only learned about this one because I was subject to propaganda on this for so many years, but because I married someone from a different country. And it's the number of continents. So depending on where you live, for example, North America, students are taught that there's 7 continents: North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. However, if you're in Latin America, you're taught that there's only 6 continents. There is no North and South America, it's just America. And essentially, Western civilization kind of creates the idea that there's a North and South America. Anyway, the point being is that consensus reality is completely dependent on what country you live in and what religion you practice. I don't know. I bet you North Korea's got a whole different take on world history if you ask a citizen from there. So I think in that we have our answer about where Mandela effects come from. That this tells you that you have to get very good at scrutinizing information that you get. I'm not saying we don't live in a simulation, because we very well might. I'm just saying we got to look in our own backyard a lot more than we do. Just clocking out, I want to give my thoughts to all the victims and families that kind of suffered losses during 9/11. What a terrible thing to happen, seriously. And also to James Earl Jones, I'm going to miss you, man. Thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned for the mystery of the Roanoke colony tomorrow.